Today, we're getting into the emotional purging process, what's really going on underneath, what it looks like, how you experience it, and some tools to support how to navigate it so you stop spiraling out. So, if that's for you, stay tuned and keep listening. Welcome to the third episode of Ember in the Dark. I'm your host, Mike Warren. And like I said, today we're going to be starting to go into the emotional purging process and recognizing what it looks like, how to navigate that, and some tools to support you in being able to ride the waves a little smoother. And the reason I say ride the waves, for me, the biggest visual that I have in my mind was when I was in that real deep spiritual connected place. It was like I was a lighthouse in the middle of an ocean on a solid rock island. The waves can crash against me, didn't matter how big they were. And I was good. Nothing would be able to affect me. Then it was like I was in a small little boat and these waves were starting to rock me and I was getting a little shaky and kind of losing myself. And then eventually I was capsized and I was paddling and trying to tread water to stay afloat and getting tired, and eventually waves took me under, and then I started sinking down into the depths and the darkness. And there's a beauty in there in the depths of the ocean that come with stillness and silence. And like I mentioned in the last episode of having the distractions being, from you or ripped away from you such that you can choose to face this or prolong it. And the analogy I had used was the 3,000 square foot room with your junk in the corner that we don't want to address. And we run to the other side of the room to distract ourselves, being, compressed down to 100 square foot room. We were not able to get away from that stuff in the corner. And because of that, at the end of the day, we're in this space to release and let go, and it's coming out regardless. It's either are we going to let it go, or is spirit, source, universe, God, however you want to label that for yourself, is going to rip it out of you. It's coming out, right? And so today we're going to talk about what that looks like in regards to your personal experience and some tools and processes that I've used to support you in allowing that to happen versus having it forced upon you, okay? And so first we got to recognize, what's going on, right? So you may feel good one day and then all of a sudden the next day, you feel like I'm getting through this. And then a day or 2 or 3 days later, you're back underneath the water, under the waves, getting tossed around, wondering what the heck is going on, right? And it just gets to a point where it feels hopeless. I know that's what it was for me. And this is what started my journey and my stubbornness in regards to understanding the human body. So in this space of the last 3 to 4 years, I've researched everything on the human body because I thought maybe somewhere along the way during my 40-day fast, I damaged my body in some format such that, I guess the analogy I would use is the computer hardware is damaged such that it is not unable to connect to the internet or source. Okay. And so I researched acupuncture, Reiki sessions, PDRT training, any type of modality you can think of, gut cleanses, parasite cleanses, nervous system, somatic healing, supplements, exercises, tools, breath works, registered for, I don't know how much money I've spent in all of this, attempting to figure myself out. And I had a friend that was supporting me in this journey, and she would share with me, she did the same thing. It's quite normal. And she would share with me, like, that is a form of resistance. That is a form of unsurrender. And, I would tell her, I'm surrendered. I've surrendered to this process. And yet I'm still going out looking for solutions, going for regular acupuncture treatments and, different sessions. Mind you, they were effective and supporting. I'm not going to say don't do those things. They are beneficial. Especially acupuncture in regulating and supporting the nervous system to switch into its parasympathetic state, right? Which in this challenging space, when you're day in, day out, facing yourself in the mirror and the challenges, the dark space, the shame, the guilt, the regret, depression, anxiety, fear, all those things is taking a toll on your nervous system, right? And so anything you can do to regulate your nervous system to get it into parasympathetic will allow for those stressors and stress to be released from the body. However, before any of that stuff can really have a beneficial effect, the first thing that needs to happen is an acceptance and a surrender. And I've had glimmers and moments of these throughout the 3 years, 4 years, such that it was kind of like a signpost saying, hey, do this, go that way. However, my stubborn ass kept wanting to go this way and doing it my way. And so universe is like, all right, stumble along on your own and find out. And so here I am. However, so what is going on is some of the experiences you're feeling today or in this recent time period, whatever it is for you, whether it's immense anger and frustration, depression, shame, regret, guilt, those denser, darker, heavier emotional states, yes, they may be triggered by an external source, like I talked about in the last episode. However, they may be things from when you were, whatever age you are, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5 years old. They can be moments in time from back then that have been trapped in the body that are bubbling up to the surface to be released. And the funny thing with emotions is, especially for the thinkers out there, the very analytical, overthinking type of mind, is we like to think our way through our emotions. That's for me. That's my experience. And that's another part that I stumbled and was very stubborn with, and not feeling the emotions. So if you find yourself in a situation that is triggering and you're experiencing the depression or the anxiety or whatever it is for you, and you notice you go to thinking about it, that can be used as a signpost or a kind of like, hey, as an attention grabber to be like, time to feel. Right. And what I mean by that is the external is a reflection of what's going on internal. It's not about being right or wrong, good or bad. It's just a reflection. And so something is happening externally to reflect back to you internally. You have these aspects within yourself that are energy's a little blocked up, a little bit out of alignment. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with you or you're broken. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. Things are actually getting cleaned up. You're actually in the process of cleaning things up and correcting that alignment. And so what happens is in the book Untethered Soul, there is a kind of the analogy they use or theory they use is, most people think of life as like a road that we're traveling down. However, in the book, it's like we're standing still and life is passing through us. And when we look at it from that perspective, and in the book, they talk about life being like a net. And that net passes through us. However, if there's any of those blockages within ourselves, it snags on the net and it pulls on it. And just like a doctor who is pushing on a sore shoulder or a sore spot, when they touch it, it's like, ow, that's where it hurts, doctor, right? The doctor needs to kind of push on those pain points for the doctor to know what area needs to be addressed. And so it's the same thing, except we are the one that causes the pain. We are the one to correct or heal the pain, as well as acknowledge and bring awareness to the pain, the observer and the experiencer, as well as the doer, right? And so as life is passing through us, these events, these situations trigger these aspects within ourselves, and then they get brought up to the surface. Now, what tends to happen for people who are unaware, and I'm guilty of this, is nope, don't want to feel that. And so we want to stuff it back down. Don't want to go there. Don't like that feeling. Nope, see you later. And then we go about our day. And that piece of us is still percolating, right? And the thing to recognize and realize is, when a situation occurs and you choose to experience anger in that situation, typically it's because anger's inside of you. When you squeeze an orange, what comes out? Orange juice, right? And the way I can describe this is if you and I went to a concert together and one of us said it was an amazing concert and the other of us said it was a horrible concert, who's right? Well, it's subjective based on our interpretation and our perspective, right? Now, I can say if we went outside on, a hot day, let's say, 90, 100 degrees Fahrenheit for the American listeners, and for my fellow Canadian listeners, 35 degrees, 40 degrees, everybody that's outside would agree that it's hot because the source of the heat is from the sun. It's an external source, right? And so what I mean by that is your experiences that you're having externally that are triggering these events, or these events and situations that are triggering these pain points within our system, not everybody would react the same way. And if not everyone would react the same way, then there's an opportunity for growth and healing to recognize that you're reacting that way to support you in healing that pain point. So an event, a situation happens, and sometimes it just comes out of nowhere. I know for me, there would be times where a week I'd feel good, and then one day I wake up and I'm down in the dumps again, and there's nothing that I can put my finger on that I could be like, what caused this? And so what's happening is we're sitting in front of that mirror, we're facing ourselves, and as we're facing ourselves, we're reflecting back with ourselves how we've been showing up, things that are ineffective, things that maybe we're not so proud of, things that we wish we would have done differently, said differently, etc. And so the emotions tied with those experiences are coming up, and they start to bubble up to the surface. And so the first step in allowing and healing this process to move it forward, I wouldn't say speed it up, I would say move it forward, is to allow the emotion to be there with no story. And what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, an event happened at your office or your work or on the way to work, and there was a bunch of anger or frustration. And so instead of looking at the event or the situation as the reason why you're angry, you just work with yourself in recognizing you're angry and then allow the anger to come up and out. So if you need to, for example, in a traffic jam or somebody cuts you off, if you need to scream, turn the music up and just scream your heart out, not intentionally to curse or, ill intent towards the person that cut you off, there's a buildup of anger you're feeling. You want to punch a pillow, scream in a pillow. These are all things and tools and exercises that I've done with myself to get the anger up and out. It wasn't directed at anyone. It wasn't because there was a reason, a certain event or a situation. It was just allowing what was inside to be expressed externally. So as that emotion, whatever it is, sadness, maybe you're just one day you're feeling sad, you're watching a movie and you just start to feel sad and start to cry, let it out. Not judge it, not put a story on it, meaning I'm only sad because of the movie or I'm only sad because of this event. No, it's just that you're sad in that moment, right? And the reason I say to allow these emotions to rise up and just flow through you is, when you look at the word emotion, a way that people have been playing with it online, and I tend to lean towards and agree with, is energy in motion, emotion. However, we tend to stuff and block it down such that the energy is not flowing. And then everything within ourselves and our energy center starts to get backed up and blocked up. And then we wonder why we're tired and fatigued. Eventually, it's like we're carrying a 30-pound backpack, 40-pound backpack for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And we wonder why we're so tired. So as you start to allow these emotions, I wouldn't say allow these emotions, this process is kind of forcing that. And that's what I mean, like being forced in front of that mirror. It's putting you in a position such that you are facing yourself to allow these emotions to kind of come up on their own. What keeps us stuck in the loop of it is when the emotion comes up and we put a story on that emotion and a reason why we're experiencing it, and then we sit and think about it. This is what I've done, right? And so going back to the first episode of me talking about this story of being abandoned by God or disconnected by God or shunned or whatever, that was the story I would go to anytime depression, sadness, any of the denser emotions would come up. That's where my mind would go. I failed God, I'm shunned, when my physical body dies, on the other side, my soul is destroyed, like I'm done, like eternally done. That's where I would go to. So I would constantly feel down, feel bad, and then those emotions come up and I would attempt to justify why I feel that way versus allowing myself to feel that way. And then I would attach to those stories Meaning now I have to quote unquote get into God's favor or God's grace to change this emotional state, meaning I'm not able to change myself because I let God down. And because I let God down, I need to get back into God's favor, thus meaning I won't feel this way. So ultimately, I'm stuck spinning my tires in this past loop of thinking. And it wasn't until I was able to start surrendering and accepting that this is where I was. And so a great example of this that I personally experienced was there was one time I was having a tough time working, and, I had a decent job working from home, making decent money, and the work wasn't hard, yet money was tight. And I remember my daughter needed some dental work, and we had to go to the dentist, got that work taken care of, and my wife had to pay, and it was like super tight. And I remember just feeling horrible as a father, feeling horrible as a husband. Like, I want to work. However, I am struggling just to get my ass out of bed and to do something. And just the money wasn't there. So I just felt even 10 times worse on top of it. And I remember coming home and I just went into the basement, laid on the floor, and I was crying and just like, I'm done. Like, I'm not able to do this anymore. Like, I give up. I'm done. And there was a part of me that said, I just said, this is where I am. I just said, that's all it is. I just laid on my back, arms out like this, and I looked up at the ceiling, tears, and I'm like, this is where I am. And I could feel this vibration and bubble in my heart space start to vibrate. And it was like literally like a bubble in water. When it's down deep, it's a small bubble. And as it gets closer and closer to the surface, it expands. The exact same thing. It was in my heart space and I could feel it vibrating, and it started to move up. And it went up through my head and out the crown. And it was just like a poof. And I literally remember just feeling like, holy. And I said to myself, I feel like crap. Yeah, I feel lighter. And I kind of smiled to myself, and that was the end of the day. And so later, prior to that, I hadn't been dreaming. I hadn't been getting good sleep. Like, I close my eyes and my alarm goes off and I wake up. Like, it was nothing in between, no rest, never smiled, haven't laughed for months. That night, I went to bed at about 11. I woke up at 4 with energy to work out, got a workout in. I was laughing. So I know something released. And so the reason I bring that up is when those emotions come up in that moment for me, I didn't attach a story. I just surrendered. This is where I am. No judgment, no hate, no worry, just allowed it to be. And when we do that, it creates a space for things to start to move more freely. And when you allow that to happen, it's the resistance and the story that is causing the struggle and the strife. I understand as well that it's easier said than done. Like, to truly surrender and truly let go, it took me 3.5, 4 years, and I'm still practicing, right? I'm not saying that's the case for you. You may be way less stubborn than I am. You may be way more effective at letting go and surrendering than I am. However, that was what I needed for me. And so that is the process. When those emotions are coming up, they're bubbling down from the depths. And like I said, they may be emotions from when you were 5 years old. Maybe parents were divorced when you were young, maybe some abuse when you were young, and those emotions were not properly processed at a young age. Because as children, we don't necessarily know how to process what we're experiencing. It's kind of like something happens and then we make up something about it and go on about life. However, that emotional fear, trauma, anger, whatever it is still locked into the system because it hasn't been properly processed, right? And the reason I say that is when you look at young children, let's say 2 years old, they're angry, sad, happy in a span of 3 minutes. They fully experience each emotion and it flows through them. However, as we get older, we tend to hold on to things longer and longer, and those things start to weigh us down. And so being in this space is kind of like the universe, God, source, sitting you down, being like, okay, these things you've been holding on to, it's time to let them go. And this is happening collectively with a lot of people. You just notice it when you're out walking around. A lot of people are, a little bit heavier. There's a lot less, not as much excitement or joy. Like, a lot of people are going through a challenging period, right? And it's very similar overall, however unique to the individual, right? And the beauty of this work is it's being able to, it can be applied to anybody's situation in a way that allows them to navigate more effectively and release more effectively because it is working internally. So, like I'll say here, if this is supporting you, please, please, please like, comment, share. Again, I want to get this information out there to support people, even if it's just one individual who, finds that this is the safe space for them where they feel heard and that there is something to support them in navigating and moving forward through that challenging time. So, hit those magic buttons, do what you guys do out there to spread the word. And as always, remember that no matter how dark it gets, even the smallest of embers can light your path. And my hope is this podcast is an ember for you. Thanks for listening.